Hello, folks. Welcome back to Management 5804, Leadership and Technology-Based Organizations. I'm Dr. David Townsend, and this will be Lecture 10.1. In this lecture, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about mainstream and niche product positioning. And so the goal here is to really start to lay a deeper groundwork for us to start to construct business models. And so in the next few units, we're going to dive deep into various archetypes or different design principles for business models. And so the goal here is to talk about how to actually build off of multiple customer segmentation strategies. And so as we talked about in the last unit, one of the benefits of digitization of business models is that we can oftentimes approach multiple different customer segments at the same time. But to do so effectively, we still have to be mindful of different strategic trade-offs that we have to make in trying to reach different customer segments. And so as kind of a key final principle before we really start to design or dive into different design archetypes for business models, we want to talk about some of the strategic positioning questions that we're going to face as strategists in designing effective digital business models. And so as we talked about previously, we're seeing a rapid increase in the rate of diffusion of new products, particularly in modern era with around many technology-based products. And so this idea of an S-curve, and this product diffusion curve, which generally starts off flat and takes some time to get traction, and then once it gets traction, we kind of move through this accelerated rate of diffusion, or how that product spreads throughout different customer segments. And then we kind of get to an end result where the growth rate levels off. And as the graph below that we talked about in lecture 9.1, you see this kind of change that happens in the overall rate of diffusion between technology-based products versus a lot of other products that have, were distributed really during the 20th century. And so a lot of digital products, again, have very rapid diffusion rates. You think about how quickly something like a platform like Facebook has been able to reach now somewhere around 1.7 billion people in really a short time frame. So less than 15 years, the company went from startup to reaching a significant percentage of the global population with its sort of social utility platform that it developed. And so again, it took many other products an enormous amount of time to gain the same amount of traction. And so this is just consistent with some of the broader themes that we've discussed in the class about the increasing rate of change that's happening largely as a result of the emergence of new technology paradigms and digital business models. And so an S-curve, again, is this kind of diffusion process. And in this lecture, we're going to spend more time talking about the drivers as to why it's shaped the way that it is. And so the goal, again, here is to build a business model that's capable of enabling a company to survive digital disruption. And as we talked a lot about in the last lecture, there's an enormous amount of pressure being placed on incumbents and startups to compete effectively within very digitized environments. And so the emergence of information technologies which enable a rapid amount of scope or rapid growth of scope in terms of operations of the organization enable kind of the emergence of enormous new opportunities. And a critical part of that is expanding mainstream customer segments. And so as we move from early adopters, which we spent a lot of time talking about in the first half of the semester, and move into the mainstream to try to scale a business model, it's important for us to understand ultimately what differences exist between these different sets of customers. And so again, just because digital technologies enable us to reach lots of customers at once doesn't necessarily negate the need to have an effective strategy to reach them. And so building on our discussions last week, we want to spend a lot of time talking about the differences in mainstream customers and what are effective strategies for reaching them. And so the S-curve is really a reflection of what we call the technology adoption life cycle. And we've introduced some of these logics before in previous lectures. And in general, it really maps the rate of diffusion or the rate of change of how a technology or a new innovation spreads throughout a marketplace. And so Geoffrey Moore has been one of the kind of prominent voices in this area and developed this technology adoption life cycle, which was built around the work of Everett Rogers and diffusion of innovation research. And so this kind of social science paradigm back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where they started to investigate how new innovations, new ideas spread across various populations of individuals, and found that the S-curve is rather ubiquitous. It seems to show up in many different settings in many different ways, And again, when you sort of compare the rate of change or how quickly something spreads, it seems to show up in just many different ways with many different types of new ideas. And so, anytime there's a discontinuous change, right? So something is a new paradigm that emerges, then Moore's logic around this technology adoption lifecycle seems to really drive some of the changes or the processes that unfold. And so the critical challenge, as the reading highlights, is this gap between early adopter and mainstream customers. And so for early adopters, we spent an enormous amount of time in the first part of the semester talking about how to reach early adopters through focusing on their problems. And so we made the point that early adopters are primarily concerned with solving some issue or challenge that they have with current products that are out on a marketplace. And so they're actively looking for things that can help them solve problems. And so we've talked about various different ways to identify those opportunities, how to construct minimum viable products as methods to reach those consumers. But early adopters are an effective way for us to really launch a new innovation and to get traction in a marketplace. But they're not really going to be the primary source of growth and wealth for the organization. And so the real success is determined by our ability to drive the product through the mainstream customer segments to really get lots of traction with kind of a pragmatic set of mainstream customers. And so this chasm which emerges is a reflection of the different motivations that these customers have between early adopters and mainstream customers. And as we'll spend a lot of time talking about, this gap is crucial for people to understand because it really drives a high rate of failure among many new innovators who are trying to diffuse new products. And so the failure, if you will, of lots of innovative new products is really determined by a failure or reflection of a failure for companies to cross this chasm, to move from early adopters, visionary customers, to the pragmatic early majority. And so we've got to be able to diagnose the challenges and adapt our strategies as we move forward. And so in order to scale, crossing the chasm is going to be paramount to our strategic efforts. So to go mainstream, right, we've got to recognize the massive difference between early adopters and early majority customers. And again, as we've kind of highlighted a bunch already, early adopters are really buying a change agent, right? They're actively looking for some type of technological solution. But the early majority, right, mainstream customers, and in general, it's about 34% of any given market is going to be members of this early majority. They're wanting things to improve their lives as they currently exist, right? So they're buying productivity improvements. They want products to make their lives better, but they're not interested in necessarily purchasing something that's brand new that's going to be revolutionary. And as a result, you can see here there's some clear difference between people that are buying things for a change agent versus those who want to kind of maintain and double down on the status quo, that they don't necessarily become great reference points for each other. And that's why there's this odd but pretty compelling problem that emerges with this chasm, where at first it seems like we're getting massive positive feedback from early adopters, and there's such excitement about our new product or service that we're offering, and then the market disappears. And a lot of it has to do with the underlying psychographic characteristics of different customer segments. And so pragmatic mainstream customers aren't looking for something radically new. They want something consistent with what they currently have purchased, what they're currently utilizing, and so they want productivity improvements off of that. They want the product that they're buying to get better, and not necessarily something that's going to be completely a different paradigm. And so this cycle that we see over on the left-hand side of the screen, where you kind of move from enthusiast, so this early market goes from enthusiasts to visionaries, then the chasm, then we kind of move to pragmatists, and then we move to conservative customers in Main Street. And so 68% of our customer base is reflected on the bottom of that graph there. And so pragmatists and conservatives are people that aren't necessarily looking for anything important or anything to change in their products, and right, they want things to be consistent, and that creates this massive gap in terms of how things are going to unfold. And so being able to reach these customer segments in the mainstream, 68% of who are likely going to be our customers, is going to require us to identify and target these customers in different ways. And so the extent to which products become breakthroughs and lead to paradigm shocks is going to be limited with mainstream customers. They're not looking for something revolutionary. They're looking for something that's proven and effective to meet their needs. And so the real sort of key strategy here is to figure out how to use a niche strategy to go mainstream. And so, as we talked about, an MVP is something that really helps you attack markets with innovators and early adopters, primarily because we're testing out key components that we think are going to solve key problems for our customers. But to go into the early majority with the kind of mainstream customers here, we've got to develop a whole product solution. And to do that, we've got to be able to focus in on a niche customer segment. And so there's going to be a couple of different pragmatic reasons for us to do that that we'll get into here in a bit. But the basic idea here is that we're trying to light a huge bonfire, if you will, with mainstream customers, but we can't simply just start from a massive pile of wood, right? We've got to focus on starting our fire with a little bit of kindling, and so we're going to target one mainstream customer segment, identify a target customer, right? Is there a single identifiable economic buyer for our product or service? And who's going to be our beachhead customer, right? So just as a military force that's trying to invade, like the Normandy invasion, they had to have a beachhead. They had to have a way to get a foothold on the beaches of Normandy before they were able to attack the mainland of Europe. And so, and similar ideas for us to really be able to attack a mainstream market, we've got to find a niche that we can gain lots of traction in to give people compelling reason to buy. So because they're not interested in changing or doing anything different in terms of what products can offer, if we're bringing something new to the market, we've got to really overwhelm these customers with a product that provides pretty compelling economic consequences, right? And so it's something that just makes so much sense that these customers realize that they would be foolish not to purchase our product or service. And so to do that effectively, almost by necessity, we really have to focus in on a couple different or a niche market to get traction. And again, this is not inconsistent with what we talked about last week when we talked about the ability of economies of scope. It talks about how do we target products individually to reach these customer segments and then design a business model which is going to allow us to offer these products simultaneously. But again, the product focus that we adopt to target the customers is something that's facilitated by the digital business model, which may be able to utilize lots of different methods to reach customers. And so the point being that we don't have one size fits all product. Digital business models allow us to do a massive amount of mass customization to reach various different customer segments simultaneously. And so to do this effectively, to give people compelling reason to buy, we're going to develop what's called a whole product solution. And this whole product solution is taking into account not just what the customer expects, right? And so this kind of generic product, which is the base product that customer might buy from any competitor, again, they're buying it based on a set of expectations, and so they think that they need certain features to be incorporated within that product, and so they're buying it. We buy a car, and we expect the car to get us safely from point A to point B, but also to be comfortable, to have heating systems, to have air conditioning, to have comfortable seats, to have reliable safety features, and all that. But there's so many other things that are built into this car that we purchase that we may not even recognize or know that's there. And so the expected product of getting us from point A to point B, along with critical features, actually is much more comprehensive than we could imagine. And so this whole product is all the things that we need to actually be able to get the job done, right? And so customers, again, are buying products to do a job for them. And so the whole product solution is something that takes into account what they expect and then what we understand to be the full scope of needs that these customers have. And so it's anticipating and understanding in a great deal of depth ultimately what this customer wants, not just what they think they want, but ultimately what they want and need. And so we can design a product that's comprehensive, that is more than just the generic thing they can buy from competitors and more of what they directly expect, but is something that's so well targeted to mainstream customer wants and needs that it allows them to again to be pleasantly surprised down the road. And so cars that have different safety features built into them, we don't necessarily think when we're purchasing them what kind of airbag protection that they have, and some people do, but most people again are very much focused on a limited set of features in the car, maybe its design and then certainly its price. but a whole product solution takes into account just a massive scope of features that are built into a product for us to be able to utilize. And so to do that effectively, we've got to adopt this systems view. And this is very much in line with our entire focus on the Dine model of complexity. And so we've talked about the challenges of complexity as it requires an agile process, and we move through the early stages of agile to target early adopters to solve their problems, to develop a specific set of data points that we can use to design the minimum viable products. And so as we extend off of that, as we've validated customer problems and customer needs with a minimum viable product, as we extend that into scaling a business model, we've got to take a systems view, a comprehensive view. And so to be able to deliver the whole product solution, we've got to have a comprehensive business model that incorporates a wide variety of elements that allows us to provide this compelling platform for our customers. And so to that end, understanding what the competition is doing, right, and understanding if the problem has already been addressed by another company, understanding, and so in order to build a compelling value proposition, and then again to tie in partners and allies, the people that can help us develop this whole product solution is going to be crucial. We've got to develop a sales and distribution channel. How are we going to get our product or service into the hands of our customers? And so do we need to have aftermarket support? Is that going to be part of a whole product solution, is to provide significant amounts of support for our customers after they've purchased our product to make sure they're potentially using it correctly. And then pricing. Is the price consistent with the customer's budget and economic concerns? So what's the unit economics of a transaction with a particular customer segment? Meaning, how much are they paying for the product versus how much does it cost us as a business with our business model to design and offer and deliver that product to one customer? And so for each segment, it's going to potentially be different, and it hinges on the type of value proposition that we're providing. But this idea of unit economics is built around a broad system within the business model, and then allows us to target multiple different customer segments, but do so in an economic fashion. And so to do this effectively, we've got to have an effective positioning. And so the case in particular this week, OnePlus is going to highlight some challenges that the company faced in order to position itself in kind of the premium or high-end segment of the smartphone industry. And so the question becomes, are you a credible supplier of the solution that you're trying to offer? And do you have an effective business model? And is it designed effectively to be able to deliver this to the end consumer? So to do that effectively, right, we've got to understand how to develop this market development strategy. And so the competitive positioning compass here, coming from some of Geoffrey Moore's work, is just recognizing that as we move through different phases through this technology adoption lifecycle, we've got to adopt different positioning strategies as an organization. And so you see early on the technology enthusiasts and the early adopters. Again, it's very much from focused on technology and then focused on products. But as we cross the chasm, we move from the visionaries to the pragmatists and to the conservative customers. We're moving from specialist customers who understand and have a very strong awareness of their needs and wants to a generalist customer who doesn't necessarily love the technology and is not a technology enthusiast, doesn't get excited about all the latest and greatest gadgets that are out on the market. They're very much concerned with what the product does, what kind of price point it might have, and so again, within that segment, or within various markets, we've got to identify a segment of a specific set of needs and wants that a particular group of customers might have. And again, because they're so generalist, there's a danger in us offering too many products that are hyper commoditized, right? So they don't have anything compelling to offer that customer because, again, we don't have this whole product that generally meets all the different needs of that niche market. And so to develop an effective position across the chasm, we've got to move away from just focusing on a product to focusing on the market segment itself and focusing on the needs of customers within that segment. And so to develop a position, we've got to be able to understand that this is something that exists, right? It's something that is there, and that customers will look at our company, look at our products, look at our business model, And again, as Jeffrey Moore describes it, its position is a noun; it's not a verb. So positioning is not necessarily something that we can just achieve or constantly change, but it's something that it really exists in the minds of our customers. But it's going to have a huge influence on the buying decision of the pragmatists and conservative customers within mainstream markets. And so it's hard to influence it with our words because again, it's so highly inertial, right? People just have a set of expectations, and so that's why sometimes it's dangerous for companies to try to go mainstream too quickly with a minimum viable product, because you can violate and create a very ineffective brand position in the minds of your customers. And begin, because you're not focused on originally high quality comprehensive products. You're focused on delivering something that solves a particular need that the early adopters have. But that creates a danger for you as you move mainstream if you continue to adopt that. And that's why the whole product solution of not just understanding what the customer expects, but ultimately really what they need, so you can surprise them or ultimately meet a comprehensive array of needs that they might have from consuming your product or service. And so, product positioning, as the second reading really highlighted, right, is focusing on end user experiences to gratify particular needs that they have. And so, to do that effectively, we've got to differentiate commoditized whole product solutions with these, what the reading calls these +1 campaigns, right? So, we focus on specific market niches, right? And so, these market niches are just small subsegments of markets, people that reference each other when making buying decisions. But instead of focusing on all males, for example, between the age of 30 and 45, we may focus on some type of affinity club or sports club, or maybe they belong to the same fraternity. Or instead of focusing on all women between the ages of 18 and 34, we might focus on people that come from a similar type of geographic area, but may have common experiences. Maybe they majored in the same thing in their undergraduate studies, or maybe they all belong to the same sorority or same church group, or maybe they all work in the same company and they have kind of fast track growth towards the C-suite. And so we're targeting our service at meeting the needs of these high profile future leaders of companies. And so there's lots of different ways that we could segment mainstream markets, but focusing on different niches within that market is crucial, because given the scope of the products that we're trying to create can tax the underlying effectiveness of the business model if we try to make it too general to all different customers. And so now we've got to really figure out how to develop something compelling for customers in the mainstream. And so to do that effectively, right, the product positioning, it really starts with the claim and framing these products to appeal to mainstream customers. And so it's got to really solve this ease of use and useful to me questions that are so important for mainstream customers. And the second part of positioning is that providing a set of evidence to back up the claims. And so mainstream customers are not going to believe the claims that you make about their products. They're going to want to see evidence. And so Consumer Reports customers, as one of my mentors always calls them, right, of people that are going to look for validated information to verify that a product is indeed safe or accomplishes or high quality and accomplishes what it says it's going to accomplish. And so you've got to be able to provide evidence to these mainstream customers. And to do that effectively, you've got to have the right communication channel, right? And so part of the sales channel so that we construct is recognizing that we've got to be able to communicate effectively with the right audience, with the right message. And to that end, this is something that's going to require some adjustment with our business model design process. And so to develop effective product positioning for mainstream customers, we've got to adapt and change to evolving customer concerns, but also competitor actions, right? Because pragmatic customers are comparing us relative to other options that they have. And in fact, one of the major, indicators, if you will, of a good mainstream customer is that they're constantly wanting to compare you with other types of competitor products. And in fact, if there are no competitor products, they may not even be willing to buy because they don't think the market is necessarily mature, right? They want to have options. They want to be able to compare those options, be able to compare prices to make sure they're getting the right and best deal. And so for these reasons, that's why it's really difficult to create a position versus conquering a position, right? And so a noun, product position, a competitive position is something that exists. And so we've got to be able to use this beachhead market to cross the chasm to go mainstream, right? To reach a specific set of customers within that, and really overwhelming them in a positive way with a compelling whole product solution, which meets not just their expected needs, but things that they haven't even necessarily anticipated yet or completely understand.